My name is Margaret Ann Green, but in Springfield, most folks just called me Grandma Maggie. I've lived a long time, 83 years if you're counting, and in that time, I've watched the world spin faster than my old bones could keep up with. I've seen boys turn into men, cities stretch out like arms across the horizon, and people forget things they swore they never would. But I remember everything. I was born in that very same town, in a little house with chipped white paint and a crooked mailbox. We didn't have much growing up, just dirt roads, borrowed shoes, and a mother who prayed over every meal like it might be our last. My father died when I was young, so my mother worked the fields while I raised my little brother. It wasn't the kind of childhood you write poems about, but it made me strong, made me sturdy, like oak. That's what folks used to say. Maggie's got roots like oak. I married my Henry when I was just 20. He was quiet, but he had eyes that smiled before his lips ever did. We built our life together in a modest house on Walnut Street. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, and a porch that creaked when you rocked too hard. But it was home. He worked construction. I worked part-time at a bakery and full-time at raising 2 boys. Derek and Ryan, they were my whole world. Every scraped knee, every school play, every late-night fever, I was there. I never missed a thing. When Henry died, God rest him, it was like someone turned out the lights. One minute we were dancing barefoot in the kitchen to an old Patsy Cline record, and the next I was picking out a casket. The boys were already grown by then, starting families of their own. I held on to that house, though. I held on to every drawer handle he'd installed, every floorboard he'd polished, every photograph that faded on the mantel. That house wasn't just walls and windows, it was him. I managed on my own for a good while. Arthritis crept in like a thief in the night, and my eyesight started to play tricks on me, but I managed. I still baked pies for the church bazaar, still made quilts when my fingers allowed. I still smiled at neighbours from the porch swing and fed the birds every morning at dawn. I wasn't useless, I wasn't done. But things changed. Family stopped coming around like they used to. Phone calls became texts. Then the texts stopped. I'd sit on that porch and wave at passing cars, pretending they were someone I knew. I told myself the boys were busy, work, kids, life, but a mother knows when she's being left behind. One winter, I slipped in the kitchen while reaching for the kettle. I lay there for hours, staring up at the ceiling, wondering if this was it. The house was so quiet. When I finally reached the phone and called Derek, he didn't sound worried. He sounded inconvenienced. "You can't be living alone anymore, Ma," he said, like it was a fact he'd accepted long before I had. "We'll figure something out." A week later, he showed up, not with groceries, not with warm blankets or kind words, but with a real estate agent. They walked through my house like it was already theirs, pointing out what could be flipped and what would need to be gutted. I followed behind them in silence, clutching a photo of Henry in my trembling hand. They'd made up their minds before they even spoke to me. "It's time," Derek said. "We found a good facility. You'll be cared for." I didn't cry in front of them. I nodded, I sat down, I waited. But inside, something cracked. I wasn't a vase they could move to a shelf and forget. I was a woman, a mother, a widow who had spent her life pouring every ounce of love into people who now saw her as a burden. The day they moved me out, it rained. Derek and his wife packed my belongings like they were rushing to catch a plane. My quilts were shoved into garbage bags. My books, the ones I read aloud to my grandkids, were stuffed into boxes without labels. No one asked me what I wanted to take. No one asked me anything. The home they sent me to wasn't terrible, not by most standards, clean, sterile. A calendar of activities I had no interest in, a roommate who snored like thunder, and nurses who smiled with tired eyes. I didn't belong there. I was still alive, still me. But every day chipped away at that truth. No visitors came. Not on my birthday, not at Christmas. I sat through holidays watching strangers receive cards and flowers while I stared at a silent phone. My boys, the ones I held in my arms as infants, couldn't be bothered to check if I was still breathing. I stopped eating much. I stopped brushing my hair. Some days I didn't speak at all. Not out of bitterness, but out of exhaustion. It takes energy to hope, you know. And I was all out. But then came Lena. She was a nurse, no more than 30, with curly hair and a laugh that reminded me of wind chimes. She talked to me like I was a person, not a patient. She'd sneak me little chocolates from the vending machine, sit by my bed and ask about Henry, about the boys, about my garden. She knew how to listen, not with her ears, but with her whole self. One night, I told her about the land, a forgotten little patch near the edge of town, inherited from my uncle years ago. I kept it for sentimental reasons. I'd visit sometimes just to sit and listen to the birds. Turns out it had value, more than I'd ever imagined. A developer wanted it. They sent me a letter offering 7 figures. My hand shook reading it. I didn't tell Derek or Ryan. I didn't tell anyone but Lena. Not because I was hiding it, but because I was finally clear about one thing. Love isn't just blood, it's who shows up. It's who remembers you exist when there's nothing left to take. So I called a lawyer. I made my will. I left it all to Lena. When I told her, she wept. She held my hands, kissed my forehead, and asked me why. I said, because you made me feel like I was still here. You saw me when everyone else looked away. She tried to refuse. She begged me to reconsider. But I was done being overlooked. This was my decision, my story. And I would write the ending myself. I didn't expect them to find out so soon. Word travels faster than guilt, I suppose. A few weeks after I signed the will, Derek came storming into the facility. First visit in almost a year. No flowers, no apology, just fury. His eyes didn't even land on me before he started yelling. "You left it all to a nurse?" he said, like the word itself was poison. "A stranger?" I looked up from my chair. My hands were resting in my lap, calm as river stones. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. "She's not a stranger," I said. "She's the only one who remembers my favorite tea, the only one who knows where I keep Henry's letters, the only one who sits with me without checking her watch." He paced like a boy throwing a tantrum. I'd seen it when he was 5. Not much had changed. "She manipulated you, took advantage of you. She's after your money." I gave a small smile. "She didn't even want it. I had to convince her to accept it. She offered to tear the papers up." That stopped him for a moment. Just a moment. "She's not family," he said. And that was the part that hurt. I wanted to tell him that family isn't who shares your blood, it's who stays when the blood runs cold. But I didn't. I let silence say it. Ryan came the next day. Quieter than Derek, but with the same tight jaw. He tried to be the peacemaker. "Ma, we just want what's best for you." I almost laughed. "You wanted what was easiest for you. You wanted to move me out of your hands and out of your mind. Well, you did. So what's the problem now?" They left angry. They threatened lawyers. They said things like mental incompetence and undue influence. I've read enough courtroom novels in my day to know where that leads. But Lena, sweet Lena, stood by me. She met with my attorney, answered every question, opened every message with a trembling hand and a brave heart. I told her I could change it, said maybe I should. I didn't want to ruin her life, but she squeezed my hand and said, "You gave me back more than money, Maggie. You gave me faith, in kindness, in purpose. Let them rage. You're still here. That's what matters." Time passed like it always does, too fast and too cruel. My bones ached deeper, and my breaths felt shorter. There were days I couldn't get out of bed, days I didn't remember what month it was. Nurses changed, rooms shifted, but Lena stayed. She read to me on quiet evenings, brushed my thinning hair, made sure my garden, now just 3 potted herbs by the window, was watered. When I cried, she held me. When I joked, she laughed like it was the first time she ever heard joy. One day, I asked her about her life. She never talked about it much, said she had no family left, raised in foster homes, never knew a mother's arms or a father's voice. Said the first person to ever call her daughter was a patient in room 12 who had dementia and thought she was someone else. She cried when she said it, and I cried with her. I told her that if I could go back and start again, I would have raised her. I would have made her lunches and taught her to sew and danced with her in the kitchen, just like I did with my boys, back when they still wanted to hold my hands. She smiled through the tears and said, "You're doing all that now, Maggie." I started writing letters then, one for Derek, one for Ryan, letters I knew they'd read one day when all the shouting had settled and silence filled the rooms they once avoided. I told them everything, how proud I was of their childhoods, how much I loved them still, even now. But I also told the truth. I told them that love is not something you owe, it's something you show, that I waited for them to come back long after the porch light burned out, that I prayed for them even when my name disappeared from their memories, that I forgave them before they even knew they'd hurt me. And then I wrote one last letter, to Lena. That one was harder. I didn't want to say goodbye. "Sweetheart," I wrote, "you were the miracle no one expected, the daughter I never had but always needed. Don't let them dim your light. Don't let their bitterness make you bitter. You're the proof that kindness still walks this earth." I sealed them all, tucked them into the drawer beside my bed, and closed my eyes that night with peace I hadn't felt in years. I don't know how much time I have left, maybe days, maybe weeks, but I don't fear the end anymore. I've made my peace with the way things turned out. They may say I was old, they may say I was fooled, but I know the truth. I was seen, I was loved, and I chose my ending, not out of spite, but out of love. If Derek and Ryan ever come around again, maybe they'll see the photographs Lena hung on my wall, pictures of me in the garden, of Henry and me on our wedding day, of Derek and Ryan when they were still boys with scraped knees and unshakable trust. Maybe they'll sit in this room, feel the warmth Lena kept alive, and understand, just for a moment, that they had everything and they let it go. And maybe, just maybe, they'll forgive themselves the way I already did, because I was never looking for revenge. I was looking to be remembered, and thanks to one gentle soul, I will be. I woke up one morning and the light outside was softer than usual, like the sun had decided to take it slow for my sake. Lena came in early. She always did on Thursdays. She brought me a muffin from the bakery down the road, the kind with the sugar crusted on top that reminds me of Sundays with Henry. We didn't say much at first. We didn't have to. That's the thing about people who care. You don't need to fill the room with noise to feel full. She helped me get dressed, even though the effort made me dizzy now. I sat by the window. My legs didn't want to work that day, but my eyes still did. The kids from the school across the street were playing on the field. I could hear their laughter through the glass, wild and sharp like wind chimes in a storm. I smiled, thinking how fast time runs when you stop chasing it. I asked Lena if she ever wanted children. She looked down and said she thought about it sometimes, but never found the right person. I told her that was okay. I told her being a mother isn't just about blood or biology. It's about showing up, day after day, when it's hard, when it hurts, when no one's watching. She did that for me. She was more than enough. Later that week, the director of the facility pulled me aside. She said the legal letters had stopped. Derek and Ryan had backed off. Maybe they finally realized I was serious, or maybe their lawyers told them they didn't have a case. Either way, the storm passed, but the damage was already done. Something in me shifted after that, not from fear, just from exhaustion. You get tired when you carry memories for too long. My joints didn't just hold bone, they held birthdays I spent alone, holidays missed, promises broken by the silence of sons who forgot who I was. I carried those things in my spine, in the tremble of my fingers. Lena said I should write more, get it out, leave something behind, so I did. Each night I wrote a page or two, sometimes to no one, sometimes to God, sometimes just to the walls. I told them everything, the story of how Henry proposed during a rainstorm, how Derek once brought me a rock from the playground and swore it was gold, how Ryan used to fall asleep with his cheek on my arm because he was afraid of the dark. These things mattered, even if no one asked about them. I started coughing one night and couldn't stop. Lena called the nurse. They gave me medicine, but I could tell by the look in their eyes that it wasn't just a cold. There's a moment when your body tells you, quietly but clearly, that it's getting ready to go. And you understand. You don't fight. You just start looking at things a little longer. Faces, the way sunlight lands on a windowsill, the way coffee smells even when you can't drink it. Lena spent more time with me after that. She rearranged her shifts. I overheard her asking for less hours just so she could sit beside me. I told her not to. Told her she had a life to live. She only smiled and said, "You gave me mine." I asked her to bring my old photo albums, the ones Derek left in the attic after moving me out, covered in dust but still full of colour. We flipped through them slowly, every page a little ache, a little warmth. Pictures of me in front of our house in Illinois, Henry holding a fish he never caught, the boys playing in the backyard before the world taught them to forget. I paused on one where all of us were sitting on the porch, ice cream melting in the summer heat. No one looking at the camera. All of us smiling at something just out of frame. I told Lena that's how I wanted to be remembered. Not in hospital beds, not as the woman in the will, but as the mother who sang off-key lullabies, who burned pancakes but served them with love, who waited on the porch long after the last car had passed, hoping maybe this time it would stop. One afternoon, I heard a knock on my door. Software hesitant. It was Ryan. He looked older, more tired, less angry. He held his hat in his hands like it was something sacred. I invited him in with a nod. Lena stepped out to give us space. He sat beside me and said nothing for a long time, just stared at the carpet. "I read your letter," he finally said. "Took me a while to open it. I was ashamed." I didn't say anything. I let him keep going. "You were right. We stopped showing up. We told ourselves you were fine, that you didn't need us. But that wasn't true. We just didn't want to feel guilty." I looked at him. Really looked. He was still my boy. The same boy who used to cry when his shoelaces came undone. The same boy who once tried to plant jelly beans, thinking they'd grow into candy trees. I reached out and held his hand. "I never stopped loving you," I said, "even when it hurt." He cried then, quietly like he didn't know how. I didn't try to stop him. I let the tears fall, let them soak into the silence that had stretched too long between us. He apologized. I forgave him. We talked for hours about nothing, about everything. When he left, he kissed my forehead like he used to, and I think, just maybe, he meant it. Lena came back in and found me smiling. "Good visit?" she asked. "The best," I whispered. That night I didn't sleep much. Not because I was in pain. I just didn't want to miss anything. I watched the stars through the window, thought about Henry, thought about Lena, thought about all the people who would never know this version of me and how that was okay. Because Lena knew, Ryan remembered, and that was enough. The next morning, my body felt heavy. My breaths were shorter. Lena sat beside me, holding my hand, reading Psalms in that soft voice of hers. I closed my eyes. I wasn't scared. I was tired, but ready. I remember hearing her say, "I love you, Maggie." I wanted to say it back, but the words didn't come, so I squeezed her hand instead. Twice. That was our thing. 2 squeezes meant me too. And then the world faded, gentle and kind. I don't know what happens after, but if there's anything left of me, spirit, memory, whatever you want to call it, I hope it lingers in this room, in this garden, in the scent of cinnamon tea Lena brews every morning. I hope it lives in her laughter, in the way she comforts strangers, in how she teaches others to be kind when it costs them something. Maybe one day Derek will walk through the halls again and hear someone call her Maggie's girl. Maybe he'll sit on the bench I loved and understand what it really means to be a child and what it really costs to forget. I was a mother, I was a wife, I was forgotten, but I was also found, and in the end, that's what matters.